Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we're joined by philanthropist, investor, podcast host, construction industry disruptor, and the author of Building Success, Tommy Whitehead. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Matthew, it is absolutely my pleasure to be here. I have been very excited about this recording since we first spoke a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'm glad you're here too, and I've been excited as well, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to read your book, which we're going to dive into extensively. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we monitor your computers, networks, and cloud accounts using a combination of AI and highly skilled cybersecurity technicians to detect any signs of attack or intrusion. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and kick him out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Hey, Tommy. So thanks again for coming on the show. I too have been really excited about this. Loved your book. I thought it was really inspirational, and I think you're going to be surprised just how much we have in common. I was reading it. I was like, shit, this could be me. And so let's dive in. What was the inspiration? What led you to write a book? Because, construction guy doesn't seem like your typical author.
Yeah, so my book, Building Success, is not about fixing outlets or drywall. So let's get that straight right now. So if you're looking for an HGTV repair guide, this is not your manuscript. You want to check somewhere else. I turned 40 on June 1st, which is when my book launches. And more than a year ago, a lot of things have happened. My mom passed away about 2 years ago, cancer in her 50s. She was very young. I was kind of staring at a precipice of, is this what I want to be doing in construction? Is this the client base I want to do? What do I want to do? What am I good at? And a lot of people are like, you're good at inspiration. You're good at stories. You're good at entrepreneurship. You're a consultant. And yes, I am a contractor. That is my day job, as I say. And it's fun to be a project manager, but I was focusing too much on the day-to-day operations. Did the drywall show up? Did the paint quality look good? And I was ignoring the gifts that I had of communication, of motivation. And so somebody's like, you need to write a book. And I'm like, no. And they said, no, you've got good stories. And it's true. I can go in, I can speak to an audience, ad lib without being prepared. I can engage a crowd. I can get somebody motivated. I can do all that. But the idea of putting it in a structure was just confusing to me until I met Shirley Jump, my editor. And she says, Tommy, I put the puzzle together without seeing the picture on the box. I'm like, holy crap, that's what I need. So I started writing, and it was nonsensical. Like, it was great stories, but they didn't have a theme. And she helped me put it into a chronological theme of what I've gone through in my life. And it's not just a memoir. It's really tips and lessons of how to be a disruptor, how to be different, how I came up from poverty and got to where I'm at today, sitting on executive boards and owning multiple companies, and just how I built my own success.
That's fantastic. Well, you talk about in your book, being a disruptor, and can you give us some early childhood examples of this?
So I can, as long as you don't judge me, all right? But this is a sneak preview on the
promises.
book. I like it. You're honest. So one of my earliest senses of entrepreneurship, we were poor, growing up in Central Florida, but didn't really know how poor we were. We knew we were poor, but I didn't know. But I always saw kids on in TV shows in those little suburban neighborhoods selling lemonade, right? They had their lemonade stands on the corner and they all made a lot of money. And I thought, man, I really want to take my family to Disney World. And that would be super cool if we could do this. So I'm going to sell lemonade. So here's the problems. I'm out in the middle of the country and my driveway is extremely long. So it's not like you just walk out the front door and you're at the curb, right? It's a very, very long rural driveway. So I thought, all right, I'm going to sell this lemonade. I'm going to set my stand up at the end of the road because I can't do it at the house. Nobody will see it. I got to do it at the end of the road. But that's a lot of lemonade. My lemonade is going to be so popular, people are going to stop like crazy. So I can't just keep running back and make one pitcher at a time. I need to make a huge batch of lemonade, right? And then I'll get the huge batch down there and then I'll sell it. That way I can be more efficient. So I'll think in quantity and scale. So what's the largest container in my house that I can make lemonade? That would be the bathtub. And so as a six-year-old Tommy plugs the bathtub up and starts filling it up with cold water and then starts scooping lemonade. A few scoops in, my mother promptly comes in and starts yelling at me, and we pull the plug. And my entrepreneurial dreams died, at least with the lemonade venture. So I can't view lemonade the same way anymore. I like it. It's okay. But it was about doing something differently. Instead of doing one batch at a time, let's do it bigger. Let's do it better. Let's stop focusing on the small and focus on the big. And even back then, 35 years ago, I was thinking in those terms. I just was too juvenile to understand them. And now, almost 40, it's like, oh, wow, I kind of had this figured out 35 years ago. It just took a while to matriculate.
That's funny. So, it's funny because you said you grew up poor, and same for me. I grew up also in a trailer, but in Pennsylvania, not Florida.
Okay.
So, very similar background, except my dad he was an electrical engineer, a smart guy, but a really just not a good businessman. Yeah, right. And so I learned so much about what to do by seeing him and doing like the opposite. Like, oh, you see a brilliant person and you think, oh, well, they should be great at what you could be a brilliant artist. That doesn't mean that you're going to be a brilliant business person, brilliant at selling your art, right? They're entirely different skills. And, you get the same with lawyers, and, lawyers get, go and they start their own firm, and it's like, now they're supposed to be great at business and marketing and all of this stuff. It's like, those are different skills. So it's funny that we have that kind of trailer poor background. And I was kind of curious for you, what did you think that do you think that was a kind of something that actually helped propel you to success as you got older?
So at the time, I thought it was holding me back. The whole mentality is just work for somebody your whole life and do your job and scrape by. And that's the kind of advice you got. And it's the only advice you had around you. So you took it until you get a little older and realize maybe I shouldn't be taking advice from people that aren't in the position I want to be in. And that's a game changer. But yeah, I think it started to propel me forward because I wanted to be the person that made money for my family. I didn't want to be in poverty. I didn't want to be a teenage parent. I was 25 before we had our son, so that's awesome. But I was born when my parents were 17 years old. There's a chapter in my book called I Taught My Mom Algebra. When I was in high school algebra, she had gone back to school because she had dropped out of high school. She had gone back, got her GED, and went into college. We were taking algebra at the same time. And college algebra and high school algebra are almost identical. It's one of those courses, they're not very different at all. Math is math. It's not complex like English. It is complex, but it's not different like English. It's the same equations, right? I was literally at the table, I had a heavy aptitude for math, and I was teaching her that. And that's strange. 17 years difference, and I'm there at the table learning the exact same subject matter and that. So it really pushed me to say, hey, I've got to do something different. I've got to go to school. I've got to learn to do other things. And I still held back with, I can do it all. I can do it all. I'm a smart guy. I can handle it. I can do better than my parents did. And the truth was I could, but I still had to rely on others. And that was one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned is just what you said. You can be a genius at your trade, at your gift. You can be a great electrical engineer. You can be an amazing electrician. You could be I've seen some painters do beautiful work. I've seen many, many trade guys that carpenters that do gorgeous work. They are horrible at business. They don't know how to run their business. And it's sad, but they think I can do it all.
Yeah.
And so that's what kills them. And that's what I've tried to take away from being younger is you can't do it all. And I've tried to take that away. And so I learned that young enough that it started to really trick in, again, 30 years later, it started to trickle in, and I'm capitalizing on that. So yeah, it did propel me. I wanted to do better.
Yeah. I think one of the things I liked about your book is that you kind of relay these lessons that you've learned through these very relatable stories. And so I think all too often books tend to get a little, I don't want to say academic, but for lack of a better word, a little academic about the the keys to success, right? There are just so many, and I think after a while, with the experience and you I at least tend to minimize it and think that there isn't that many, but it turns out we're doing like a million things right. We've kind of built up a huge knowledge base of what it takes to be successful. And I think one of the things I liked about your book was that you made it, so many of these kind of lessons were in these really relatable, easy stories. So I thought that was a really nice touch and different from a lot of books.
Well, thank you for that. I believe in being honest and candid. So, um, a whole generation was born and raised on the Brady Bunch, right? Everything's perfect and everything's resolved in every episode. Um, two of the most popular sitcoms ever have been The Simpsons and Roseanne. And why? Because it was showing American life and struggles that we all actually do go through. The Roseanne, like it or not, I have been through struggles of hearing my parents yell about bills, not knowing where, if we have money for gas to get to school, not having clothes. Those things I've been through. A lot of us have been through that. Another one is I lost myself in 2020. If it wasn't for my husband's salary, we would have lost a house. I almost lost my business. It was everything. Since then, I've recovered and it's been wonderful. I'm on the board of directors of the Tampa Club. It's a high-end business club on the 42nd floor of the tallest building in Tampa. And I was sitting at a table with somebody and I was telling him a little bit about my story in 2020. And this guy's wearing a suit that's probably $2,000. And I'm talking to him and I tell him my story and he says, Tommy, he's like, yeah. I had a staff of a couple hundred, lost it all, went down to 11, lost this, lost that. There was a moment of vulnerability. By putting my vulnerability out there, it allowed them to express their vulnerability and to feel like, okay, other people are going through this as well. Just because you have that $2,000 suit doesn't mean you're immune to these life changes. And so I like to relate and tell people, do not feel embarrassed by your failures. You should only be embarrassed by your failures if you refuse to get up and do something different.
Yeah, you talked about it in your book, and I really like that. I think we take and I think most successful people take that same perspective on failure that I think a lot of people struggle with. I think we grow up in a culture and in school where everything is here's the material, you're tested on it, you're supposed to be perfect. Perfect, 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 right? So for all those years growing up, very formative years, you're told to be perfect in these things. But that doesn't apply to the real world at all.
Nope.
And
Nope.
the way that you get, success isn't by being perfect. It's through those failures. And if kids aren't given the opportunity to fail and encouraged to try and fail so that you can learn, you don't become the Edison who tries, 10,000 times to not make the light bulb and then gets it right. You don't become the Ford who fails and goes bankrupt numerous times before getting it right. You get depressed because you didn't get 100% the first time you tried something. Of course, you're not going to get 100%. It's the real
Yeah.
world. You're going to fail. You're going to fall on your face. You're going to learn all the things that you didn't know. And it's going to be thrown in your face. The world doesn't care, right? You get the tough lesson real fast. Like, shit, that was expensive. Oh, shit, that's embarrassing. I just fell flat on my face in front of everybody I know. Okay,
Yeah.
so what? But
Make those
yeah, go
and
ahead.
make those mistakes when you're younger. When you make the mistakes as my age, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
When you make a grand here or there when you're 20 is seems like a lot, but it's nothing. So don't be afraid to capitalize on that, to learn and say, okay, I made this mistake. I'm not going to do it again. Let's move forward. And don't be embarrassed by it, because the most successful people have had huge failures in their life. There's not been a single person out there that hasn't screwed up something. Mark Zuckerberg, one of the richest people in the world, dropped out of college. Come on, So he had a failure at college, but a huge success in business.
Well, let me
Everybody's
ask you.
success looks different.
Yeah, how do you think you came to this, I guess, appreciation of failure, in order to succeed?
I've seen my mom fail a lot of times and then blame everything on everybody else. And she would do that a lot, and she would keep things to herself. I talk about this in my book just a very little bit. She and my father had gotten divorced years before she died from cancer. She continued to pay a life insurance policy without letting me look at it. Turns out it was null and void from the time that they got divorced. She was paying for 4 or 5 years on this life insurance policy that was worthless and lost thousands of dollars on it because she would not admit that something happened, that she failed, that she needed help. And there is a treasure trove of those types of stories over my life. And I realized I can't be like that. And I love my mother dearly. She's a lot of my personality is her with changes, with corrections. Like her hard-headedness is definitely in my wheelhouse, but with a lot more tact.
Yeah.
And so I just learned that from her as, hey, you got to stop. And so I realized, you know what? I'll put myself out there. Plus, what's the problem with admitting failure? People are going to be embarrassed. What is embarrassment? It's the fear of other people judging you. Take that fear away. If you put it out there, they don't have a way to judge you. If you own up to it and say, I learned from it, they can't judge you. You've taken the fear away. Then all of a sudden the embarrassment goes away. So I'm not embarrassed to say that during 2020, when we were scraping by, that we went to the schools that were giving out free food. My son needed bread and milk, and instead of paying $20, they were giving it to me for free. Not embarrassed to say that I went and utilized that service that I'm entitled to as a taxpayer. And on the flip side, I've given thousands of dollars to Toys for Tots, to the aquarium, to other things. When I had the ability to, I've given back. So I've learned from my mistakes, but I've paid it forward, and that's important. Just learn and pay it forward.
Now, why do you think you weren't like everybody else around you? So like we both grew up in these environments where, and I think about this a lot because I have, 4 brothers and sisters. Well, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, 4 all total. And the second I could get out of Dodge, actually the town wasn't called Dodge in Pennsylvania, but the second I could get out of there, I called up the Army recruiter when I was 15. I'm like, I'm gonna join the Army, get the hell out of here. He's like, oh, that's great, kid. We'll take you. And he's like, how old are you? I'm like 15. He's like, hangs up because it's illegal for them to talk to kids that young, right? Yeah. There are laws. And so he's like, call me back when you're, I think it was 17, right? Or 16 and change. So I call him back up. But I knew somehow I knew, and I don't really know how, but somehow I knew that like this wasn't for me. And if I stay here in this town, like everybody else, I'm gonna be like everybody else. And I didn't want that. Right. And I knew that somehow I just knew that. And so I had to get out of there, and I did. And then I went on my way, and the Army was a great, help to me, to start that. But I've often wondered, like, was I just born that way? How is it, and so I'm curious for you, was it something similar? I mean, what made you different from all the other kids around you, that you didn't end up staying just like that, grow up to be like your parents? Because that's kind of the standard, right? That's my last names are like Smiths because, well, you were a blacksmith just like your dad, who was a blacksmith just like his dad. And so for the longest time, it's just that's kind of the norm. Why do you think, why were you different? What happened? Any idea?
I don't know. I've thought about that before. So, like you, I wanted to get out of my hometown. I skipped my junior year in high school. I graduated at 16 years old. I wanted to go out of state to college. My mother refused to let me out of state. So I went to USF, University of South Florida. And back in 2000, 2001, that was the give me school. Now you got to have like a 4.9 GPA to even be graced with a tour. But I don't know what prompted me other than I knew I could do something better. There was something in my head that said, I know I can do something better in my life. And I had to act on that. And at a juvenile age, when you're a teenager, you don't know how to act on it. So in my case, I was gifted academically. So I just pushed as hard as I could to get out of school as fast as I could to remove myself from that environment. I just thought, if I got out of this environment, then I'll be able to figure it out. And that's what slowly started to happen. Once I got out of the environment, once I wasn't crowded by the fear, the anxiety, all that all the time, and able to see other viewpoints, that's when I really started determining what I wanted to do with my life. Growing up in a small little country town is a very narrow perspective on what life is supposed to be, versus at that time going to Tampa, which is a big city. And Tampa is a big city, but it's not a New York, right? And so when I had the ability my senior year to go to New York. I fundraised and got to go to a trip, and just to see other things and what possibilities were out there. That really forced me to say, "Hey, look at this. You're just a teeny little drop. You want to be bigger. You can do more." And so I just kept striving towards doing something bigger and better.
That's great. Now, in the book, you tell the kind of the story of how you went from being on somebody else's payroll to kind of your own. And can you tell us that journey, that story of how you went from how you started your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd always had kind of an entrepreneurial sense, but it just didn't pan out. Like, I was going to be a bookkeeper. I actually have a huge background in director of finance and accounting before I went to construction. So I was going to do that. It just kind of didn't work out. Getting people to spend money on their books is important, and they won't do it. It's crazy. Uh, but how did I actually start into construction? So I was working for a company that was renovating thousands of homes. We went through, I project managed or touched about 3,000 homes in just a few years. And it was massive, massive undertaking. And this was back during the Great Recession. And then I knew that they stopped acquiring. We were whittling through our inventory. And one day I got a call. They said, "Hey, we've stopped acquiring. We're going to transfer you to maintenance. And thanks." And I said, "You understand I'm gonna be the highest paid maintenance tech in this entire company nationwide." "Okay." And they hung up and they called me back. "Yeah, we're not going to keep you." And I'm like, "Okay, damn it." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm panicking. I'm freaking out. I had just signed a lease on a new house. It's just me and my son at that point. I just started dating my husband and boyfriend. It was just there's never a good time, but that was like, wow, I just got my life back on track from my divorce, and this is destroyed me. 2 hours, I got a phone call from one of my construction partners that had worked for me. "Hey, come in. We want to offer you a job." Like, it wasn't "Oh, I'm so sorry, whatever." No, it's, "Come in now. We need to talk." I was like, wow, I have never been laid off in a job and gotten a job offer in 2 hours. And so I listened to them, and I ended up not going with that firm because I did not believe the values of their firm. And it didn't work for me, but it led to the opportunity to work with somebody else for almost 2 years on my construction company prior to Tomco. And I found out that when a gun's to your head and you got to make money, you use your skill set and you make that money. And this was feeding myself. This was feeding my kid. And many of us have been in that spot where our children are so important to us that we have to push forward, do things we don't want to do to take care of that and to take care of our family. I have a disabled sister who's a veteran and with 2 kids, a single mom. I have an elderly grandmother. I have my husband's mother is disabled. There's a whole litany of family that count on me now. And so I have to push hard to make sure that that's there. Um, but it was scary. But once it happened, I'm like, whoa, I am working more hours than I would have, but it's my hours. It's my time. It's my choice. And I get to see the product of my own creation versus being a mechanism to increase somebody else's value. I'm increasing my own.
Yeah. It's always surprising to me, I think the difference between entrepreneurs and people who don't is that there tends to be this belief that we can. And sometimes it's unfounded, right? It's like, well, you've never done it, so why would you believe that you could? And I think that's one of those things that keeps a lot of people from started. They're like, that's crazy. Whereas we're the type that are like, well, we could jump out of this airplane and we'll figure out how to, build a parachute on our way down.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine. And everybody else on the plane is like, that guy's fucking crazy. He's gonna die. Might, but then again, I might get to the ground and it might be a great adventure.
Yeah.
And I think there's just there's something there that I think a lot of people don't have, that entrepreneurs do have. And I don't know where it comes from. And I clearly you had it too. I mean, you made that jump even though you had no reason to believe that you could, right? Because you'd never done it. But why do you think you believed that you could start your own business and be fine having never done it?
I put some thought into it. I know that I did well in other businesses. I went into a small resort that was floundering and found $300,000 they had lent out to somebody who didn't even know. Literally, they did not know that they had written $300,000 of checks to other people. Yeah, so that's why they were floundering. And stories like this over and over again, working in large scale operations, solving micro problems that were macro problems that really added to the bottom line. So I saw that with somebody else's money, with somebody else's resources, I could do it. So I thought, why not? Why not do that myself? Um, that's just a piece of it, because those other businesses are established, and so it's something to work on. And there is something different about fixing something existing versus creating something. It's two very, very different mindsets. You can pay fixers to come in and fix things all day long, and they're expert at that. You ask them to create something from scratch, and they will fail horribly. It's just a different mindset. I fortunately have both mindsets. I just shifted more to the creation side of things. And I've even had people that have had decades worth of experience working for somebody have a difficult time with the idea of creating something because they're so used to walking to a job. Here are your parameters. Here's your functions. Here are what you need to do. As you know, as an entrepreneur, today here's my functions, and tomorrow that might change. It might change at lunch what your functions are.
Yeah.
It's about supporting your clients, and it's about supporting your employees to get things done. I just had that aptitude. I like to think Super Mario Brothers. You always heard parents say video games will rot your brains. Well, I read an article years ago that said that the kids that played Super Mario Brothers have a higher aptitude for problem solving because it's not a beat 'em up game. It's really a logistic problem solving type game. Solve the puzzles. So to this day, every 5 to 8 years when the new Mario game comes out, I buy the station, and that's the only game I play on that Nintendo. That and Zelda, that's another good problem solving game.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm a problem solver, so I've just managed to figure out how to solve other people's problems.
That's fantastic. So you write this book. Did you write it with a particular audience in mind? Like, hey, I'm going to speak to people who want to start a business, or how'd that go? I mean, I know you had a great editor who, obviously helped put it
Okay.
together, but I'm kind of curious because it's a big to do. It's a big lift. It's not easy.
It's
So just
not.
kind of curious, was that like, hey, I'm going to help people start a business. I'm going to help entrepreneurs, learn from, or I just want to tell my story and see if it helps anybody.
Well, it started more with telling my story, but I'm a strong believer in know, like, trust. I have cultivated amazing relationships all over the Tampa Bay area. I'm known as a connector here because I get to know so many people, but because I genuinely care about them. I want to understand if you run an ice cream shop, if you work in the aquarium, if you're at the museum, what do you do? I want to understand it. But I wanted to um, create that introduction to myself so that I could do business with the community. But in the same token of introducing myself and showing people, hey, I'm not just a contractor. I'm a co-owner in an AI firm. I've started a capital company. Come work with me and invest in real estate. See my life and why I respect your investments when you put cash with me. That was a primary focus. What it turned into as an additional focus is what you said. Telling my story is letting other people know that, hey, you're not alone.
Yeah.
It's not just you. It could touch the LGBT individual that's in the construction industry, and that's kind of a challenge for us. Like
I would
myself,
imagine.
it could touch that audience, and that could speak to them a certain way, but it's not an LGBT book. It could talk to the entrepreneur trying to get their first business off the ground, but it's not exclusively an entrepreneurial book. It really is for people that want to try to think differently about what they're approaching,
Mm.
to stop getting sucked into their own problem, to speak it out loud and make it go away, fix it, solve the next problem, go to the next challenge. And so it's got a large audience demographic, really. And we really see, though, probably the 20 something to 50 something male audience is probably a little bit more the stronger category, mainly because men, as you know, we're told you don't have feelings, you don't have emotions, you can't talk about it. Women are known as more effective communicators, and they convey their emotions, they can process faster. Men are told that's not allowed. And when we're told that, we hold this stuff back, we internalize it. So I wanted to be out there, put myself vulnerable, and realize, look, I just put my life in front of you, and I'm vulnerable, and you can come for me, but you're not going to. I'm not afraid of you. You can't do anything worse that's already been done to me. So you could be in the same situation. Nobody can do worse to you than what's already been done to you. So don't let them have that power. And I just wanted people to know that story.
No, that's great. That's funny because you talk about women processing things faster. It's funny because I'm in a house of women, and I think this is what it's like to be mentally challenged, right? You know, where you're like everybody else seems to be thinking and processing so much faster, and you're like, huh, okay. And it takes you so long to catch up. I'm like, this is an exercise in humility. I mean, like every day. It's like, huh, okay. So yeah, sometimes I wish like, oh, if only I'd have married a dude. No, just kidding. Or life would be so
No,
much
my
easier.
husband does some of the same stuff sometimes. Don't worry. It's we still argue about what to have for dinner every night. It's no different.
That was great. So let me ask you. So you talk about asking for help, and I think that's a huge one because we grow up in this society where it's do your own work. Even in school, you do your own work, and group projects are, well, they're bullcrap at best. They certainly don't teach people how to work together or seek out assistance on things to kind of achieve their goal. So you talk about that, and I think that's great. And then you mentioned that you're a connector, and I'm kind of curious. Those two obviously kind of go hand in hand. The focus on people and I'm kind of curious, was there a transition to that, a light bulb moment where you're like, you know what, I can't do this on my own, I need to ask people. And then did you then end up parlaying that into a, hey, you know what, people are great, and the more people I connect with, the more good I'm putting out in the universe, the more business I get, the better this whole thing works. Was there like a light bulb moment, or was it one of these things where like, nah, I read this book and it was do this, that, the other, and I started doing it and it worked? What was that like for you?
So let's go back to my mom for a second because there's a couple parts of this question. So one, my mom was a loser shit kind of person at any time. And that exacerbated with my dad having that personality and my sister sometimes having that personality. So I was the pacifist in the family. I knew how to recognize people's emotions very early in age, much more earlier than most children ever do, so that I could pacify that. I was an introvert. I was awkward. I was the smarter kid. I didn't get along with anybody. I really didn't have friends. And that happened all the way up into my 20s. My 20s, I started to realize, wait a minute, this perception I had from my family to be able to defuse a situation isn't much different than a perception of reading somebody's emotions when they're talking to you, to realize how they're communicating. And that's why some people are like, that dude's creepy. No, he's not creepy. He just doesn't communicate his feelings or his thoughts as well as he is, but he's really nice. Those kinds of things I could start picking up. So then let's fast forward. It started to take time. So then I realized I was great at talking to people, and I could be the life of the party, and I could communicate, and I was always interested in what everything else happened. So then my 2020 happened. I was kind of in a depression. My mom had gotten cancer. I needed to focus on something I could solve. I couldn't work, so let me focus on something. So I started volunteer work. I got into a nonprofit on a board. Actually, it wasn't a nonprofit. It was a social club. I turned it into a nonprofit, quadrupled the organization, took them from $2,000 to $40,000. We gave $30,000 or $40,000 in charity during my tenure there. And I realized, wow, this feels good. Like I'm using expertise that this small nonprofit could never afford to do that. We keep going forward. And I never thought about this in a business standpoint. All I thought about is, oh, I met this cool person. They're doing a shoe drive for these refugees. Let me use my other nonprofit just to try to collect. So we threw a pool party, got $2,000 in donations. Then I'm like, hey, I grew up poor. I know how to stretch this $2,000. I'm not just going to write them a check for $2,000. I'm going to go shop for the shoes. I went to the local outlet store, told the manager what I'm doing. She has 6 employees going around helping me shop for all the clearance shoes. I cleared out the entire store's clearance inventory for men's, women's, and children's shoes.
Nice.
And she gave me a 10% discount. Now,
Nice.
it doesn't stop there, right? And so there's a point to this story. And the point being is I decided just to keep posting about that drive. It didn't take me any money. It just posted. I got a call. A prison distributor had $30,000 worth of shoes that they no longer could sell to the prison system because of minor changes. $30,000, plain white shoes, but $30,000, and there was some other women's clothing items and stuff that they could not sell to the prison system. We need to get them out of our warehouse. I made a couple calls, $100 U-Haul later, and we had $30,000 of donations based on a Facebook post.
Nice.
Now, when I call that organization, And I didn't ask for anything. I just saw cool calls and I wanted to get involved. When I call, that person who doesn't take everybody's call, she answers my calls. If I ask for something, she does, it goes out of her way to introduce me to people. And I never asked for any of that. It had to do with just selflessly giving. And that meant so much to people that they want to give back. And so it goes more that was with donations. I've done it over and over again. I'll meet somebody that has an IT problem, and then I know an IT guy, and I just connect the two. I don't make any money on that. That's not anything for me. I just say, oh, I have somebody that has a fix. I have somebody that has a problem. Let me connect them. That happens over and over and over and over again, just by natural course of action, just in a daily conversation. And by doing that, that has built me as a connector, because I know so many people now. They all want to get to know Tommy because Tommy knows everybody. And it's not that I'm writing checks to everybody. It's not that I'm asking them for anything, but by giving myself and taking my time to connect them and help them in their endeavor, they look out for you even when you don't ask them. Sometimes I don't even talk about what I do, and they're like, Tommy, you've done all this. What do you do? Oh, okay. Well, I'm a contractor and an equity fund manager, and I do this, this, and this. And all of a sudden I get 5 introductions to somebody they know. So
That's
it
great.
spreads like wildfire. So it's pretty cool. Just give out to the universe a little bit and it does come back.
Well, you hear that all the time, and I think it often falls on deaf ears. So I think it's great to hear you kind of being yet another person saying, just get out there and put out good into the universe, and it comes back. So let me ask you, I think for a lot of people, they struggle with the idea of networking, and or maybe they get the idea, but they struggle with the logistics, the managing a network. So do you have any tips or recommendations? Because obviously at this point you've got I would imagine uh likely thousands of people that you know, and you keep it. Is it just all up here? You're like, oh yeah, I've always been great with names. I remember everybody and everything, about them. Or do you have a system?
So I'm horrible with names. Usually my husband remembers all the names. So I love it when he comes to events with me, which he doesn't very frequently, but he'll remember every name. It's great. I am a big proponent of name tags, to the point where I've thought about bringing name tags just to give out at not even my event, so I can remember Matthew. Now I can remember. So
I'd
no,
love to see that one go down. That's great.
I would get away with it. They'd be like, who is this crazy guy? They'd laugh and make it a joke.
Hmm.
Anybody else, it'd be creepy. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
something I
yeah.
can do. So networking 101, I do a lot of that. All right. If you're nervous, and a lot of people are, and I've taken to a lot of people to networking events, go up to the host. And if you don't want to go up to the host at first, email the host. And I've gotten these emails as host of events before, right? I want to come out to this event. I need to for my business. I'm extremely nervous. I don't know anybody. And you'd be surprised how many times people will actually reach out and tell you that. So if you're new to a networking event and you're go with a friend if you can. Even if they're not in business, just go with a friend. If you can't do that, when you get there, go introduce yourself to the hosts. Hi, Matthew. I'm Tommy. I'm a contractor. I really don't know much about networking. I'm pretty new to this. I'm a little nervous, to be honest, but I know it's something I need to get better at. Do you have any tips or advice or people you can introduce me to? That host will go out of their way to introduce you to 5 people in the room, that introduce you to 5 people, that introduce you to 5 people. You will not be alone.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to talk about yourself at first, break the ice by asking somebody else about themselves. Hey, Matthew, what do you do? Oh, I'm in IT technology. Oh, what kind? Do you fix printers, or do you write code, or do you, what do you do? People usually feel comfortable talking about themselves if you ask them. Then they usually pause at some point in the conversation and says, oh, Tommy, what do you do? Then it's easier because you've broken the ice, you've developed a relationship or a bond, even temporary.
Yeah.
And then you got to rinse and repeat. You got to be careful, put your phone down, don't stand in the corner. I am one of those people, whether I'm hosting the event or not. If I see somebody standing in the corner with their phone, you're most likely going to see me coming for you. I'm going to come and introduce myself and say, hey, what's going on? And if I knew nobody else in the room, I'm going to grab you and introduce you to somebody else. I am one of those people that will get you around. Also, look at the type of networking event. If you want to network and you're nervous about networking, find a volunteer opportunity. Some of your best networking ever happens at volunteer opportunities, because you're working with people that have a like mind. They're all there to help children, to help the animals, to help whatever. Maybe you're not so great with people. Go do a beach cleanup with people. They're environmentalists. Go to your local animal shelter. Start talking to those people. It's a small step to get you more comfortable with talking with others. And I have a million other tips, and I talk about this and give presentations from time to time. I even gave a presentation to a marketing company once about networking, because they were great at marketing to other people, but they were horrible at marketing. The individual subcontractors were bad at talking about themselves. And you gotta just put yourself out there and realize that everybody else is putting themselves out there. It's okay if you're not good at it at first. None of us walk into it being good.
That's great. Well said. And then, well, let me ask you. So for those people who then go and they do that and they're like, okay, I've got what, I think a lot of people struggle with what do I do? I've now met 5, 10 people. And if I do this 10 more times, by the time they leave, they're struggling to remember the person's name and what they did and everything. Do you recommend any particular type of system for people? Like, here, this is how you keep track of them, make these sorts of follow-ups, these sorts of introductions. What's your recommendation to people?
So we'll do two, and they're the same system, but one's old school and one's new tech. All right. Old school, and I still do this. I get a business card. I sometimes write a note on something on the note, just a word or two that reminds me of something they said. It lets me associate. That's how I remember names easier, and I'll associate. Mine might be as easy as blue scarf, only because for some reason I've associated with blue scarf with the IT professional, with whatever. I've done that. Or if they said something they're looking for, I'm looking for, and that's one thing that people don't do in networking events. You got to say what I'm looking for, not just what you do, but what I'm looking for. I'm a contractor. That doesn't mean I'm trying to build skyscrapers. All right. I'm looking for somebody that wants a custom build house. So try to write down what they need. Put those on business cards. That's a quick way to do that. All right. So then your follow-up system to that is take those business cards by the next day, quick email. Hi, Bob. It was a pleasure meeting you. It's nice to know a new electrician. If I see anybody that needs electrical work, I'd be happy to let you know. Let's keep in touch. Thank you. That's that simple. Now let's go with the digital approach. It's the exact same way, except for there's an app called Popple, and there's a bunch of apps out there that have digital business cards. And if you spend I spend the advanced features like $100 for the year for my digital business card, which gives me QR codes people can scan, they can link and connect, digitally sends information to me right away, which is great. If you're networking on vacation in a hot tub in the Mediterranean on a cruise ship, which I was able to pull my watch up and somebody could scan a QR code and we traded contact information. It's great.
Nice.
But you could scan the business card right there from your phone. It uploads it and tags where you met the person, and you can even type in whatever notes you want to. Then it puts them into a CRM system if you want it to, and it's easier to click one button and send an email that way. So it's new school, it's more advanced and efficient, but some people still get the tactile sense of the business cards. I still carry business cards, and I'm more likely to use a digital card with somebody that is a newer or younger generation, and more likely with a paper card with older. Or the type of deal. If I'm working and talking to somebody about capital investment, I want to physically put a card in their hand.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to a subcontractor, a plumber that wants to do business with me, I'm more likely to give them a digital contact.
Love it.
So yeah, it's simple. Most networking fails because you never follow up. Take just a few minutes. It could be the same canned email. And if you suck at writing emails, go into ChatGPT. You can even use the free version and say, my name is Matthew. I'm an IT professional, and I met people at this networking event, and I need to write a follow-up email that's no more than a paragraph. Bam, it's copy and paste.
Yep. That's great advice. And honestly, your book is chock full of really great stories and advice like this. So I think anybody who's interested in business, who's in business, who's thinking about starting a business would be wise to get a copy of your book, which I believe is June 1st is the release date. Is that right?
The release date is June 1st. You can find all the information at TommyWhitehead.com. It's available for pre-order. And you can get your digital copy, you can get your hard copy. And if you happen to be in Tampa around June 1st, we're holding the Building Success Summit. It's a book launch party, but I'll give you one hint. In addition to sipping champagne on yachts, which is part of the party, there might be a live cast of Rocky Horror there. So All that information is on TommyWhitehead.com, and it's easy to connect and reach out to me there as well. All my socials, heavy on LinkedIn. I usually accept most LinkedIn connection requests, and I love to talk to people. So.
Well, that's fantastic. Tommy, thanks so much for coming on. I wish you the best of luck with the book. I think you've got a winner here, so I think it's going to do just fine. And I hope everybody goes out and gets a copy. Thanks again for coming on, Tommy.
I appreciate the time today. This was great.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.